G'day, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Mindful Men podcast. I'm your host, Simon Rinnie, and today we're getting mindful about men's mental health. And a trigger warning that we are going to be talking about mental illness today and suicide as well. So if you do get triggered by these conversations, feel free to skip this episode. That's okay. But if you do stick around and you do get triggered, please reach out to your support networks afterwards. And joining me today, I've got Paul Edmundson from South Devon, England. How you going, Paul?
How you doing, Simon? You okay?
Yeah, I'm doing well, mate. It's 6 a.m. over here. What's the time over there?
It's 9 p.m. over here, so I'm getting ready for bed.
I'm dragging myself out of bed and you're about to drag yourself into bed. So
Yeah.
good timing. Now, Paul, you're the founder of Male Mental Health Warriors.
Yeah, MMH Warriors.
MMH Warriors. Wonderful.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about this today and like what you're doing there and where the inspiration for this came about. But I'd like to start off the show by learning a bit more about you and where you're from and where you grew up and some of those key life moments that kind of led you to having this chat with me today.
Yeah, no problem. So, 37 years old. I was born in England, South Devon. I've lived here pretty much my whole life. I've got one of three siblings, so I was the youngest. My parents separated back when I was 6 years old, and that was the start of what I assume was to know as my borderline personality disorder. That was the triggering episode. So sadly for me, as life had gone on from that point, it just got out of hand, lost control of myself and everything around me, and I just didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know who I was, or I couldn't control much in my life, to be honest. And it took me a very long time to get the correct diagnosis and to start getting the professional help, the right therapy.
Yeah. So you said borderline personality disorder. For anyone who's listening who doesn't know what that is, can you describe what that is and define it for us?
Okay, so borderline personality disorder is very similar to bipolar, not quite the same, but you get your massive highs and then you get your massive lows and everything in between. So your moods can flip between happy and sad and angry and all the rest of it within sometimes minutes. Like I said, 1 minute you can be flying high and you feel ecstatic and great about life. Then the next minute you're down, you're crying, you're angry. You want to end your life and you're thinking, but why? Like you don't even really know. Like nothing necessarily has happened in your day. It just seems to just come out of nowhere.
And when did this first start for you? You mentioned like after your parents separated, but like when was the first symptoms? What was that like? Do you remember?
Yeah. The symptoms classically do always come out in adolescence. So it was mainly in my teens, and for me it was when I really started having relationships. So relationships with women. Like I say, my first proper relationship, I was 17, 18, and that was a telltale sign. Then with the jealousy, the insecurities, the fear of abandonment, it all started to rear its ugly head.
You said it was like took a while to get the proper diagnosis. So like how long did you go through or did you keep it bottled up for starters? Like was it something that you kept inside?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately for me, like no one around me had any clue back then, especially like about mental health problems or thinking Paul needs some professional help. It was just a matter of Paul's misbehaving, he's acting up, and he's a bit of a naughty boy. So for me, I used to just question myself, thinking like, who am I? Literally, that was the question I'd ask myself daily, because I've always fundamentally thought I was actually like a real nice, caring, compassionate chap, but then my behaviours sometimes were just so extreme, and on the opposite end of that, I just thought, who am I? What am I? And I just had no control over it. And I didn't get the correct diagnosis until only 6 years ago. So you're talking a long old time of suffering.
And did you get a diagnosis previously? Or...
Yeah. So previously, obviously, I knew something wasn't right myself. And between me and my mother, we arranged to start getting some private therapy, and I started to go through all the different ones. Again, just trying to establish what was happening for me, but no one could really put the finger on it. But I did get misdiagnosed, and they said I was morbid jealous, so morbid jealousy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And when I read up on that, I was thinking, say there's a checklist of say 10, I was taking maybe one or two. I was thinking, this ain't it. Like it didn't sit well enough for me. But they were like, yeah, you're morbid jealous. not a lot you can do about it. Take some antidepressants and off you trot. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah.
It happens so often, is this misdiagnosis, and we're talking about it a lot in the socials at the moment. And like when we're misdiagnosed, it can send you down this rabbit warren of different types of medication, the wrong medication, even the wrong therapy types as well, where it just doesn't help. It actually probably hinders in some cases. What was it like getting the proper diagnosis and stepping on a proper recovery pathway?
Oh, wow. Do you know what? It was a bittersweet, if I'm honest. It was like a double-edged sword for me, because on one side I felt a little bit embarrassed and not so much ashamed, but I didn't feel happy with saying I've got a label now. Like, I've got an actual diagnosis. You have borderline personality disorder. Like, I'm put in that category. Then you've got mental health, and it's for everyone to know. And then the other side of me was just really massively relieved, because I felt like finally I understand why my behaviours have been the way they were, and my actions, because up to that point, like I said, I really did not have a clue. I was trying to self-diagnose, but it just wasn't happening.
So, like, tell me about how you're coping through all these years. Like, what did you do to try and relieve the pain or the pressure when it was building before the diagnosis and before medications?
If I'm totally honest, before being correctly diagnosed, I didn't really have any decent coping mechanisms, to be honest, or strategies, because, like I said, I was blind to it. I didn't know. I didn't have the right tools or skills. I mean, I did all the different therapies, from your basic counselling, your cognitive behavioural therapy, CBT. I did the CAT, cognitive analytical therapy. I did EMDR twice. I did all these different things. I went on 2 anger management courses. I was trying in every way I could to cover everything, and thinking that would give me some tools. But borderline personality disorder, it's so specific, and you do need the correct therapy, which I later on got in life. But to answer your question, I did not cope very well, if I'm honest. I was living a very reckless, dangerous life, and I'm very, very lucky to be here to tell the tale.
Yeah, were you doing things like drinking, partying, and all that type of stuff?
Absolutely, yeah. So drinking, dangerous driving, dangerous sex, sleeping unprotected sex. It was fighting on the streets. I nearly went to prison. It was just, it wasn't me as in my character. Do you know what I mean? I was acting out of character. That's why I used to be so conflicted with myself, because I thought, if I'm acting like this and doing this, and then all of a sudden, I literally did feel like Jekyll and Hyde. 2 different people.
Yeah, and I often find, like, in that mental health space, like, we can often wear 2 masks. We can wear the one that's the outside mask, but then also there's one inside that's very different. And I used alcohol for a long time before I was even diagnosed to numb the thoughts. So I live with obsessive compulsive disorder and depression and anxiety, and my thoughts will race a million miles an hour. So alcohol was a way for me to numb that and to slow things down and relax. But it, particularly my teens as well, was also like this like magic wand of socialization. And as soon as, like, we started drinking around 16, 17 years old and going to parties, like, I just came out of that shell a little bit, and then I kind of got used to everyone being, oh, Simon's awesome at the party and all this type of stuff, and that stuck around until I'm 39 now and still dealing with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Is that something that you really struggled with? Or not even necessarily struggled with? Is it something you went through? Like, was alcohol or drugs or anything like that something that helped you manage it?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm honest, personally, I never really turned to alcohol, because sadly for me, like, my mum, after my parents separated, and later on in life, like, a few bad events did happen in the family, and she turned to alcohol. And my mum, I would safely say, was probably a functional alcoholic.
Yeah.
And from this real intellectual woman, businesswoman, would come home, hit the Jack Daniels, the drink, and she would turn, like, quite nasty. And I used to think, wow, like, if that's what alcohol can do to someone, I don't really want to entertain it. So I tried for so many years. I was teetotal. I used to avoid it like the plague, but clearly I would find myself in certain situations when I just wanted a blowout, and I would go out, I would do the drinking, the drugs, and I'd end up in trouble. But it was just a mask. Like you said, it's just a crutch.
Yeah, I'm amazed that you actually managed to have that mindset so young as well. Like, we often get that intergenerational impacts where maybe we see our parents doing that or our grandparents, and then we kind of fall down that trap as well. So I'm surprised, and it's amazing that you had the guts not to go down that line particularly early.
Yeah, I think because my dad was so into his fitness, and he was a boxing coach, so he had brought me up from a little baby to box, be healthy, fitness, look after your body. You know, it's a temple and all that stuff. So I think it went in quite deep, and I thought, you know what, you got to look after yourself. So I didn't want to start putting substances into my body if I could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit about your dad. Like, your parents separated, and did you see much of your dad after that point?
Yeah, I used to see my dad 3 days a week, and it was literally just go to the boxing club. So he would drive over, he'd pick me and my brother up, take us over, we'd go to training for an hour, hour and a half, and then he'd drop us home, and that's pretty much it, really. Yeah, that was a relationship.
And did that last for very long? Like, or did you?
Yeah, he kept it going. Yeah, he kept it going all the way. Yeah.
Like, I'm wondering about this role model, moment of you being in the boxing club and being around your dad. Like, what's some of the things that you remember from growing up that like instilled in you, like, I guess, a bit of a drive for healthier living?
Yeah, like I said, my dad, he is very fanatical with his fitness. I mean, he's 71 this month, and he's still training every day. He's obsessed with his body weight. Honestly, he puts me to shame. He's like, yeah, I need to lose a couple of pounds. I'm thinking, wow, like, I need to up my game. So, I mean, that side of it was brilliant, I suppose, because, like you said, out of the three siblings, like, I was the only one who's kept that going, really. But at the same time, the whole boxing side of things, for me, I was a very soft, meek lad. I was a very shy, introverted lad, and I didn't really like the boxing scene. I used to love football,
Yeah.
but my dad was all for boxing, 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 be a man and all that stuff. And it did sort of get pushed on me. My first experiences was getting punched in the face at like 7 years old, and near enough crying, thinking, I don't like this. Like, I don't want to go back. But he's like, no, you will. You'll get used to it, which you do. But it was quite tough love.
Yeah, so that tough love thing, like, I'm reflecting on that recently in some of the podcasts that I've been on, and even in my own podcast. It's like, I grew up in the 80s and 90s in northern suburbs Adelaide. It's a very working class area. But yeah, the mantra was that guys and boys don't cry, and boys need to be tough, and boys need to be a man, and all this type of stuff, which I was probably very similar to you. I was a bit of a softy inside, and I played football, so I wasn't the kind of guy that would be on the bottom of a pack or anything like that. I'd be the guy that had amazing speed on the outside because I didn't like the thought of getting crunched. So I would, avoid that, like the plague.
Yeah.
So how did that mindset shape you into who you are? Did you, and particularly living with mental illness, did you feel like you couldn't talk about it because it was, say, less masculine to talk about things like your feelings and your emotions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with my dad, bless him, even to this day now, he's a real classic old school type of guy where he couldn't deal with his emotions. He couldn't even deal with an embrace as like for me to give him a hug. It's like a stand leaning back, like awkward handshake type of thing. I mean, he's got better in time, but yeah, there was not a chance on this earth that I could have ever have gone to my dad and asked him, or even tried to express myself. And if I'm honest, that I tried with my mum and I got rejected. It was just turned away. Don't be a baby. Do you know what I mean? Grow up, get on with it. And it's just like, see you later type of thing. So I didn't have any real support network when I was a kid.
That's exactly the kind of point. Like, we grew up in, I guess, a generation where we didn't talk about that stuff, and it wasn't normal. And even like, I've been on this journey for 10 years. So I was diagnosed 10 years ago. And even then, like, I think we're still a long way before normalizing mental health discussions. And the fact that you're on here sharing your story is an amazing thing, because it goes against all that grain that you've been brought up on, and guys like you have been brought up on. Why do you think it's important for you to start sharing this story for other guys?
For me personally, I mean, because I've struggled so much and I have attempted suicide a number of occasions, so I really do feel like I've been given an extra lifeline, and I feel like I've got to use this to the best ability to help other people, to basically to prevent them from the struggles that I've gone through. Do you know what I mean? So if I can raise any awareness on mental health and the suicide prevention, then that is my absolute calling. So I feel like that is why I'm really pushing this. I just want to speak to and reach out to all the men to say, you're not alone. Do you know what I mean? And just, there is help out there, and there are better days. You may not feel it at the time, but I promise you that things can look up and change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you have this kind of discussions with your mates?
You know what? Again, I've got a very small network of friends. I've always been, like I say, quite an introvert, so I don't like big groups of people. But my friends personally, they don't talk about it. They keep it all to themselves. I mean, my best friend, he prides himself on being an enigma because he doesn't talk. You don't know him. He's like so mysterious. And I find out some things like from his mum or like his partner, and I'm thinking, I don't even know that. And I'm his best friend from 11 years old. He does not ever speak. He doesn't let anything off his chest, where I'm fortunate where I do talk. I can't not talk. And I think that has been a lot of therapy. It's therapeutic for me to offload.
Yeah. And maybe they'll be listening to this podcast and get some inspiration to start talking. And it's as we've been talking about, it's something that goes against our grain to talk about these types of things. So I'm glad you're sharing this story. But let's talk about suicide prevention and suicide as well, because you mentioned that you've survived 4 suicide attempts and multiple self-harming episodes as well. Without going into too much detail that triggers you or anything like that, can you tell us a bit about your mindset during these times and how you got through it?
Yeah. So the first attempt, I just remember just again feeling so desperate, fearful, pure anxiety. Do you know, I just could not see a way out of my own head, and I couldn't see life changing or getting any better. So I felt like the only way to end this suffering was to literally end my life. So I took myself off and attempted it, but like I said, it didn't work. I came back and I felt a little bit numb, actually, thinking, wow, like I was actually 100% going through with that, and it, for what reason, didn't work. Whether it's a higher power or it just wasn't my time or what, I don't know. But like I said, it was just a very, very lonely, scared place. And I just, at the time, I didn't feel like I had anyone to talk to, even though I was living at my mum's house at that moment. But I didn't feel like I could actually knock on the door and say, I'm feeling this way, I want to end my life. Do you know, it's just that isolation. You get so stuck in your own head and lost in your own thoughts. And again, you don't see any future or any way out of that suffering. And that's the only way I can describe suicide, is like, most people generally don't actually really want to die. You hear these stories all the time, the people who jumped off that Golden Gate Bridge. There's been some survivors and they've said, I didn't want to die, but the second they've leaped off, there's that they're regretting it instantly. And I thought, all you're trying to do is end the suffering. That's all you want. You just want to end the pain and the suffering. It's not really ending life, because as we know, life is beautiful and there's some amazing things to do in life, but it's just ending that suffering. But again, just knowing that that's not a resort. It shouldn't even be a last resort. It shouldn't be an option.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And so you've done this multiple times, and there's also some self-harming as well. Like, describe the self-harming stuff. Like, what was that about?
Yeah, so the self-harming, again, it's a classic trait of BPD sufferers, and it's almost like a release. I can't describe it other than it feels like if you had a real big sore spot on your face and you just think, I just have to relieve it, you know what I mean? And you pop it and you get that like, satisfaction, like the pain's almost subsided.
Yep.
For me, I used to cut my head. So I would use a knife and I would cut my head purposely, because I thought I didn't want scars on my wrists and my arms for people to see. So I thought if I hide it in my hairline, no one can know. But when I would self-harm, I used to just, like I said, it felt good in a very morbid way, a very disturbing way. That release, I felt like there was nothing else that would ever quite itch that scratch, if you know what I mean. Or, do you know what I mean? I just couldn't. It was, like I said, it's disturbing to even really say it was good, but it helped, but in a very unhealthy way. But it, like I said, it did relieve the mind, the suffering. I used to feel like I was going insane inside. But the minute I used to cut myself, and then I'd feel physical pain, it's almost like your brain's gone from thinking stuff to the physical pain, and it's like it's redirected it, and then it resets you, and then you go back down. That's how I describe it.
Yeah, so I guess it's a good reflection point. I was reflecting just then about the healthy coping mechanisms that we have, and we'll talk about that in a sec, but also the unhealthy coping mechanisms. It's those attempts, it's the self-harm. You know, for me, it's like the drinking, partying, for guys, it's partying, all that, the sex, all that type of stuff, where we put ourselves in I guess, danger's way, not necessarily immediate life and death danger sometimes, but harm's way, to get that release. Because as you said, you want to get out of your head. It's so, you get stuck in that head and constantly, and it goes around and around and around, and you try to think your way out of it, but it just makes it worse. And a lot of the tips I use with guys in my own therapy business, because I'm a therapist now, is writing it down is a great way just to get those words out of your head, and then burn them, rip them up, whatever it is, throw them away, or even talking about it. So I find actually a therapeutic process is being on this podcast and talking about my experience as well, as a way of just disempowering the words that sit in our minds. Because often then when we talk about it, we can reflect on it and go, oh yeah, like I was going through some pretty shit times and rough times, but I'm strong and I'm resilient. I'm powerful. I can get through this. And these are just words that are stuck in my head. So by
Yeah.
writing or talking about it, certainly does relieve some of that process. But like, so you've gone through this, like, you know, suicide, self-harm episodes as well. Like, where did you turn to next? Like, what was the recovery steps next? Like, did you talk to someone like a doctor or a friend or a family member? Like, what did you go through next to get through this?
So yeah, I mean, again, it's unfortunate, but after one of the attempts at suicide, I finally got sent to the hospital where we had some quite experts, some high up people were basically saying that we're going to get him some proper help now because the GPs, the local doctors, they were useless. No disrespect to them, they were absolutely useless. Like I said, palm you off, medication, misdiagnosis, goodbye. The hospital at this point were like going, nah, he needs proper help. I mean, I was begging to be sectioned, if I'm honest, because I said I'm a danger to myself. Lock me away, like, cause how many more chances am I going to get, you know? But they weren't willing to do that, but they were at least stepping up and saying, we're going to get you the right professional help now. So I got put on a DBT course, so dialectical behavioral therapy, and that was obviously for predominantly BPD sufferers. And that one, I would safely say, out of all the therapy I've done over plus 10 years plus now, and that was the one that helped the most. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So talk us through. I'm glad that you got to the hospital and finally, and this is that person or that system that goes, hang on a second, what's going on here isn't quite right, and let's get you on the right track. And sometimes it's just moments in time, like where like perhaps DBT wasn't around before that. I'm not sure, or maybe there's a new breakthrough in a certain types of medication as well. So sometimes it's timing, but a lot of the time it's just misinformation. Our GP clinics are, I mean, COVID particularly has ramped up the pressure on our GPs. It's really hard to even get one in Australia. I'm not sure what it's like over there. But tell us about DBT. I've heard a bit about this lately, and I'm not an expert in DBT. But so, what is it for you, and how did it work for you?
So basically, it was twice a week, and it was for a year. So that was quite intense for me because previously I would do a bunch of therapy, say for like 6 sessions, little block sessions here and there, and then that was it. So for twice a week for a year, you would do a group session where they would start teaching you like mindfulness exercises and all these different coping strategies. And then I'd have my one-to-one session where we would go through like a diary of my week and my moods, and we would pinpoint like the spikes of why and what happened. And it was all about, there was the classic one is like about the wise mind and the rational mind. You know, it's like that monkey brain. And once the hippocampus is switched over in the brain, and then it's too late then. Do you know what I mean? So it was just learning about creating the space before you get to that point. So it was, I learned some really good tools. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
What's some of those mindful techniques that you used or that you learned?
Yeah, so the mindful techniques would be just to basically trying to distract your mind. So, like you said earlier about writing stuff down, thinking about stuff, so you could write it down, or literally, just for me, a good one I used to use would be like the sounds. So I'd close my eyes and I'd try and listen to the sounds around me, whether it's the birds singing, people talking, cars moving around. And I would try and detect as many noises and sounds as I could. So that would literally create enough space from me exploding or getting up. So it was just literally tricking the brain and just trying to redirect it, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I love those sound techniques. There's a great one on YouTube that I've used personally. So, like, often in my mind, like, I'll be thinking about too many things at once, and that's when the overwhelm comes as well. And there's this like brain training on YouTube. So it's like, it's got 5 different sounds or whatever. Like one of them is like a running water, one's a cowbell, one's wind chimes or whatever. And the idea is that you focus on one and then try to ignore all the other sounds, and then that helps train the brain just to focus on that one thing. And then you switch, so you go from the cowbell to the wind chime, and you go through this process. And it's brain training. It's a really cool technique that I found useful for sound, like through sounds as well. And it also it kind of feels like a bit of a meditative state as well. You can kind of come from a heightened place to a relaxed place. And I found similar in men's yoga, actually. So I'd go into a yoga class, and this was when I burnt out in 2020. I started men's yoga, and I'd go in there really hyped up and anxious and worried about a lot of things. But then I'd get to a moment where I'm just focusing on the breath and the sounds around me and the movement. And then I just feel so much more relaxed. And then I could leave the yoga class in a much better headspace. And I really love this mindfulness. And that's where the mindful in mindful men is. It's around mindfulness, around grounding ourselves. but also mindfulness and the stuff that we've been talking about, like how are we showing up in the world? How did we grow up? What was those relationships like? You know, what was the social construct of being a bloke like as well? So how, if we can be mindful of that, we can go, okay, we can reflect and go, drinking like my mum did wasn't going to serve me, or partying like I did in my teens wasn't going to serve me. And so how do we do that growing forward? And then for the next generations, like I've got kids, I've got a young son who's 5, and trying to be that example for him so that he doesn't grow up, you know, similar to us, like where we had to bottle things up for a long time, and he can just say, yep, I need help. And that's a normal discussion, you know, like we normalize it, like our physical health, like because we talk about our physical health all the time. You know, your dad talks about his body and losing weight all the time. This is a physical thing. So let's start doing the same with mental health, and podcasts and hearing your story is a great way to start this conversation. So let's talk about MMH Warriors, and you know, how did this come about and where was the inspiration from?
So, I mean, I've always flirted around the idea of setting up like a men's mental health group. So last year I set up a gym where I was hoping to get like-minded individuals. We're going to do a workout, and because I'm a personal trainer as well by trade, so I thought, get the guys in here, we'll train, we'll sit down, we'll have a cup of coffee, cup of tea, and have a nice little chat and stuff. But after COVID, money was so tight. I mean, as you know what happens, everything just literally went down the pan. So I had to pull the plug on that one, sadly. I got myself in quite a bit of debt, but I took the risk, but I didn't get the rewards. But it was always lingering on in the background, thinking I want to help people. I mean, every year at Christmas, I'm always trying to raise money for charities or feed the homeless people. It's always been in me for many, many years. And it was only literally 6 weeks ago, I had this conversation. I was chatting to someone that I didn't really know, and I was opening up about my mental health. And then they started opening up about theirs, and they were like, I've never told anyone that before. And I was like, do you know, it's like a light bulb moment. I thought, do you know what? This is it. Like, literally, if me sharing my story is evoking them to feel comfortable enough to want to open up and tell me theirs, I thought, I'm onto something here.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, how can I get myself out there? So I literally did a bit of research. I looked around. I mean, Andy's Man Club, they're a very big organization over in England. I think they're branching out worldwide. And I've watched a bit of their stuff, and I thought, you know what, I could definitely do what they're doing, you know, and maybe give it a different spin on it, because there's more room out there for people like ourselves to try and help. So yeah, that's exactly why I started it. Yeah.
Oh, cool. So have you kicked it off yet? Like, have you got things happening, or are you still in the planning stage?
Yeah, it's sort of in the planning stage. I'm going to start my group next week. That's going to be my first night. So it's going to be on a Tuesday evening where the guys can come over, like I said, have a brew, have a chat, hopefully make some nice friends, and you know, like I said, a problem shared is a problem halved. So I'm really looking forward to next week. But in the interim, I've been plugging the social media. So like I said, radio stations, all the social networks, I'm uploading as much content as I can from my personal experiences, and I'm getting a lot of feedback, which is sad in one way because it shows that people out there really struggling, which we know anyway, but then it's very touching, and I feel very blessed that they're taking my videos and it's helping them. It's giving them inspiration to seek help. So yeah. I'm really plugging it.
Yeah, I've seen you on the Instagram, and I think that's how we initially connected. And I love the videos because, and I find Instagram, like I never was on Instagram before my burnout, and I use it as a recovery process where I was just doing daily affirmations, kind of, you know, just trying to pep myself up. And that's where I got connected with the OCD community, actually. I'd never heard of an OCD community. Like, when you think about mental health and mental health discussions, it's pretty much depression and suicide. That's what people talk about. So to find that OCD community and other people like me, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, like I'm not so alone in the world. Like, there's the community of people out there. And they actually introduced me to ERP, so exposure response prevention, which is a great therapy for OCD. And then I've since gone on to use that myself and do some work in that. And now I'm looking at training in that as an actual therapist as well. So, you know, sharing your story on social media is going to be a great way to connect with other people living with BBD, and even more mental health more generally, and guys as well. Like, guys, there's so many guys out there just waiting for this, because I mean, everyone's talking to me, Simon, when are you going to start a men's group? And I'm like, I'm trying, I'm getting there. I've got so many things on the go at the moment, but I think it's a huge need that you're plugging, and I hats off to you that you're putting yourself out there and doing it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Do you know, I really got massive inspiration from Tyson Fury, who is the heavyweight champion boxer. he struggles with bipolar. And the last fight that he had previously, was against Deontay Wilder in America. And when he did the interview after in the backstage, and you could see he was like welling up, and he said, "I did that for you." He said, "Everyone that's struggling with mental health," he said, "we'll fight this together." He said, and him telling his story, this man who's 6'9", like 20 stone, heavyweight champion of the world. I thought, if he can talk to people and tell them that he was on his knees, crying his eyes out, attempting suicide, I thought, I'm no one in comparison. Do you know what I mean? I thought I can share my story, because if I'm honest, previously I would tell people, but it would be selective people, because I didn't want the stigma attached to me, or Paul's got mental health and we're going to avoid him, because like I said, some people are still so uneducated on the matter. But now I just think, I took massive inspiration from him, and I thought, I'm going to literally reach as many people as I can. So I will do that.
Yeah. And you've got that unique perspective because you've also a PT as well. So, mixing mental health and exercise is a fantastic way to manage mental health conditions as well. Tell me about the relationship of exercise with your, strategies for managing your mental health.
Honestly, exercise is everything for me, literally. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say it's compulsive or an addiction, but it's most definitely up there. Isn't like it's medicine for my mind. It's not even about the physical. I don't really care about the aesthetics or how I look anymore. It's about the mental release, and it was proven, isn't it? The endorphins that get released when you exercise. And again, it doesn't mean you got to be lifting big heavy weights or running London marathons. It could just be going for a nice walk, break a gentle sweat, but anything, just getting yourself moving. It's absolute medicine for me.
Yeah, and you mentioned like a great point there of not overdoing it, almost like it's just something that can be gentle. It doesn't have to be, like you said, the marathon or anything like that, because it can become addictive in an unhealthy way as well, where you're spending too many hours exercising. I mean, I've got a podcast that released today with Kimberly Quinlan, who had a eating disorder, and in order to manage that, she would exercise for hours and hours and hours each day just to keep on top of that. So, and that was an unhealthy coping mechanism. But exercise in a large part, if we do it, an hour a day is fantastic. If you can do that, half an hour a day, you don't have to, break yourself to get those endorphins flowing.
Exactly that. Literally, that I teach people all the time. I say, even if it's 3 times a week, like I said, half an hour, 45 minutes a day. But if you're really, really unhealthy and unfit, and like you really hate the idea of exercise, I'd say just do 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. And I guarantee you'll want to do more, 20, 30, 40. Because like I said, the release, the endorphins, you feel great. You feel fantastic after training. So it's an absolute must.
Yeah. What about nutrition for you? So what does food intake look like for you?
Do you know what? Again, back in the day, I used to be quite obsessive with eating clean. It was all for me back then about the physical appearances. So I would have to be having barely any carbs. I wanted my abs and all the rest of it. And if I was honest, I was hangry all the time. I was moody. I wasn't a nice person. My mum was like, "You're a little bastard when you haven't eaten." She's like, "You need something to eat." And she'd cook me a meal. And then she was like, "Oh, you're purring like a little pussycat now." And I thought, yeah, she's right, actually, because even my poor kids, they'd probably get a bit of the backlash because I'd be a bit grumpy and irritable, all because I wanted a 6-pack and I wouldn't be eating much food. I was just having a bit of protein. But those days are gone now. I'm thinking, do you know what? I want to enjoy my food. Who cares about the abs? Like, so now I will eat pretty much what I want. I try and keep it healthy, obviously. Fish, chicken, do you know what I mean? Turkey. I love my sweet potato mash, my vegetables. I love porridge for breakfast in the morning. I like my fruit. So I try and keep it clean, but I do like a cheeky pizza every now and then, and a burger like everyone else. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to deprive myself anymore.
I'm hearing a lot about this thing called intuitive eating at the moment. It's around eating what you want, but not overdoing it, and recognizing when your body. It's almost like mindful eating. It's like recognizing when your body's full, and then that you don't need to keep going even after you're full. And there was a great one around, you don't necessarily have to clean your plate, because I remember growing up, for me, like, we couldn't leave the table unless we cleared the plate.
Same.
But it's also like, so now with our son, like, he's a bit of a fuss eater at 5, and he pretty much flat out refuses to eat vegetables or anything that doesn't look like a chicken nugget. But now we're like, and I used to find myself saying, "Gus, you've got to finish your plate. You've got to finish your plate." But now I'm trying to tune into this mindfulness approach. It's all right. Well, if you don't want to finish that now, that's okay. But you've got to finish that before, if you get hungry later, that's what you're going to. You're not going to go to a yogurt or a sweet or anything like that. It's going to be the rest of your dinner. And it actually seems to be working at the moment. So
Oh,
I'm
that's good.
for
That's
any
awesome.
dads out there who are trying to get their
Yeah.
kids to eat, try this intuitive eating approach because it seems to be working for my kids.
Do you know what? It's funny. I had this conversation with my daughter the other day because she's got a real sweet tooth, and we're having some chocolate. Where normally I would always be like, 50-50, we'll break the bar in half, and she has half. And I thought, she's half my size. She doesn't need to be eating the same as me. And I thought, but I don't even need to be eating as much as that. So I broke it down. I think we had 3 pieces each when we'd probably say normally have about 10 or 15. I said to her, now real savor the flavor. I was trying to teach her a bit of the mindfulness. I said, just make it last. Do you know what I mean? Because again, kids, I mean, I'm guilty of it as well. Sometimes you're watching the TV and you're stuff in your face. You're not even registering it. No wonder you don't even get full. Your brain's not even knowing the food's going in. You're just piling it in. You're watching TV and you're scoffing. The next minute you've done like a massive cake, chocolate, crisps, and everything else. It's like it's binge eating, and it's not healthy. So like you said, to have that mindfulness about eating, and really they even say to count how many times you chew, don't they? To really process it in your brain. That is awesome techniques to help people, especially the kids who are overweight, because I don't know what it's like in Australia, but England now, they're grotesquely overweight. Things are getting out of control. And since the lockdown, honestly, all the children at my daughter's school, they've blown up. You don't even recognize them anymore. It's like they've got little fat suits on, and that was all from those few months of being locked away, gorging on whatever they wanted, no exercise, boom.
Yeah. And that all, what we put in our bodies and the way we're exercising impacts our mental health as well. But
Absolutely.
also what we're reading and consuming on TV. I remember COVID, got to a point where we had to stop watching TV because we were getting all those hourly updates on the news about what was happening, like who was infected, how many people were in isolation and lockdowns, and it just became too much, and our mental health suffered as well. So what's some of the things that you go to for like reading, or do you watch TV in terms of filling your mind with good stuff?
Absolutely. Well, that's one thing that I've always prided myself on. Like I've always seeked looking up to having decent peers, because I didn't really have it as a child, to be fair. Like my parents, as lovely as they were, but there wasn't exactly like amazing role models that I could really strive to be. I didn't really have it at school. I didn't have it around with my friends or work colleagues later on in life. So I have always watched stuff on YouTube. So I followed Tony Robbins. I took myself years ago to a seminar in London because he's such an inspiration to me. I've always tried, like I said, surrounding myself by the TV. Obviously, you can't always guarantee it where you live, but reading books, Jordan Peterson and stuff like that, Jim Rohn, any of these motivational speakers or life coaches that just give solid advice. I'm all for that. Absolutely.
Yeah, wonderful. Feeding the mind with good stuff does help us on this mental health journey as well. Helps us reflect on what we've been doing and how we've been showing up. I read a great book recently, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson.
Yeah, I've started listening to the audio. Yeah.
It's an amazing book, and I love it because he swears a lot, which is a bit like a blokey culture, but it's so much around values and reflecting on those values and what's really important to us and what we're willing to struggle for. It's a great reflective piece there from Mark. But Paul, how can people get in touch with you if they want to join MMH Warriors? How do they do it? Where can they look? Is it just in person, or do you do online stuff as well?
Yeah, no, like I said, I want to be online, so I'm branching out. I want to make this worldwide. So at the minute, anyone can find me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. I've got a channel on YouTube. It's all the same. It's MMH Warriors. So type that in, I'll come straight up, and it'll be endless amounts of videos and material on there. And of course, people can reach me if they want to. They can drop me a message, pick up the phone. I'm here to listen, and help.
Awesome. I'll get the links from you as well, and we'll put them in the show notes so that people can access them pretty easily. Yeah. 2 more questions, and I'll let you go. One, you mentioned you're a dad, and I didn't know you're a dad. So I love talking to dads because I'm a dad myself. I love to hear what fatherhood means to you, and particularly within this mental health journey that you've been on.
For me personally, I've got 3 children. I've got a very supremely close relationship with my daughter. They always say the daddy's girl, and we really, she's like my best friend. I've got her saved under my phone as my guardian angel. She's 11 years old. Her name's Summer, and she has kept me here, if I'm honest. All these times when I really hit rock bottom and I couldn't continue, and I didn't want to live no more. She was the one at the back of my mind. I thought, I'm staying for her. Like, she deserves better. Of course, my other two do as well, but I thought, she relies on me so much. We've got such a special bond. I thought, I cannot let her down, and she has given me the strength to continue. And I love my kids more than life itself. I mean, I've got their handprints tattooed on my chest and my body. So I'm like, they are my everything. I live for my children, absolutely. Like, I've always been told as well, which is lovely. It's a great compliment that I'm a great dad, and you know, and I'm good with my kids. And I thought that is such a compliment for me, because it's the most important job in my life. Like, I don't really care as much for careers and accolades. I thought to be a good dad and to love my children and give them the best that I can give them, that means the world to me. So yeah, my kids are everything.
Awesome. And do you find fatherhood, challenging? Do you find it hard, or do you find it easy?
I had this conversation with my mum the other day, because we were saying how within the siblings, how they can be so different. And now my youngest son, who's Mason, he's 8 years old, and he pushes my buttons. I tell you now, like, do you know what? I get told all the time he's just like me. That's why I thought maybe he is, like, two peas in the pod. I thought it's such a shame, but I love him to pieces. But yeah, we do clash a little bit, and it's quite testing, very. And when I was struggling as well, I did not have any energy to be able to really handle him. Do you know what I mean? Where Summer, bless her, she's just like a little angel, and she's so quiet, you wouldn't even know she's there. Where Mason would be testing, he'd be jumping around, he'd be back chatting me. And, oh yeah, I'll be struggling. But yeah, it keeps you on your toes.
My wife often says our son Gus is just like me as well. I'm like, oh no.
yeah. So I say, oh please, poor lad.
Oh, wonderful. Last question I like to leave with all of my guests is to plug something that makes you feel good. So this is something that you can kind of pay it forward and share with the audience of something that, and it doesn't have to be mental health related as well. It could be just anything that's making you feel good and making you, have a bit of a pep in your walking and your talking as well.
I mean, I've got two ones. One, music. Music is so important to me. And if you select the right track, I mean, it can totally change your state. Just like that. I mean, Tony Robbins talks about how you can change your moods and your states within a millisecond, and it's true. So listening to some real positive, nice, upbeat, happy music, that lifts my spirits big time. And it's the same with comedies. If I'm feeling a little bit low, and now I've learned over the years with all the therapy, like, you need to regulate that mood. Do you know what I mean? So for me, I'll put on a good comedy show, even bloopers, like on the reels on YouTube, like when they've cocked up the outtakes, and people who laugh, it's contagious. You cannot watch that and not smile. It's near enough impossible to do. So that is what I would recommend. I would highly recommend whack something on YouTube, funny videos, and see yourself not laugh, because it's near enough impossible. You will laugh.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite TV, like a comedy show that you're watching on telly?
I've got a few of the old classics. Only Fools and Horses. That's like a real British classic one. I love Ricky Gervais. So he's done quite a lot, like The Office and Extras and stuff like that. I absolutely love all that. So yeah, Bottom, Rick Mail, Adrian Edmundson. That was old classic back in the 90s when I was growing up. So yeah, I like the nostalgic type of stuff. But yeah, I'm up for any comedy, to be honest.
Yeah. What about on your playlist? What are you listening to on the music at the moment?
Do you know what? I'm a stickler, me. I mean, I do love 90s. It's almost like I'm stuck in the past. So I'm always listening to like the 90s dance classics. I can't get enough. Cannot get enough, honestly. Love it.
Like, just think of, like, is it Darude Sandstorm or something like that? Just
yeah, that'd be like early 2000s. Yeah, but yeah, that sort of stuff. Yeah, just upbeat.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of Backstreet Boys on our radios at the moment. I'm not sure what's going on. So
we've had it on our radios for the last 10 years that they'll play the same song. That's all they've got. It's quite concerning, but yeah, I don't mind a bit of Backstreet Boys either.
Yeah. It reminds me of growing up.
That's it. That's why I think, like I said, it's nostalgic for me. It takes me back to my childhood, at the times when I'd be with my friends, we'd be out on the streets playing football, and all the previous things that you used to do when you had the pure innocence. Do you know what I mean? I love those times. So yeah, it takes me back.
Well, Paul, I've had an amazing chat. I'm so thankful that you reached out and were keen to come on the show, because I think the more we can get guys on the show and talking about their lived experience with mental illness, is the more we can help normalize mental health discussions and help people around the world feel less alone. So thanks for coming on and sharing your journey. And I look forward to seeing how MMH Warriors goes. And I'll be a keen observer from over in Australia. So thanks so much.
Oh, no, thank you very much, Simon, for having me. I really appreciate your time. Really do. Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure that you like it and leave a comment, and then share it with your mates. Also, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a moment of future episodes to come.